that. Number 15. Red dye. If you think that eating bugs is something that people only do in impoverished countries, then you'd better think twice. In fact, I bet you've been eating bugs for your entire life. You never even knew it. Have you ever eaten anything with red food coloring in it? It was probably made from bugs. Cochineal bugs don't look like much of anything at first, but if you grind them up into powder and add water, then you'll find they form a brilliant red color that is the perfect additive for food products. Yogurts, candies, juices, and all sorts of other items have been artificially reddened using ground-up bug guts. Don't freak out just yet, though. Just because something is red on the shelf doesn't mean that it's made from bugs. Take a look at your label first. If you see carmine, carminic acid, or cochineal extract, then guess what? You're eating bugs. Natural Red 4 and E120 are two other sneaky terms that mean the exact same thing. Number 14. Durians. This is the most foul-smelling fruit known to man. People have compared its stench to onions wrapped in an old gym sock, and also to French kissing your dead grandmother. With such rave reviews, it should come as no surprise that durians have been banned from Singapore's mass transit system, and most other public places. Let's be clear about one thing. The inside of the fruit looks as disgusting as it smells. When you crack open the durian fruit's prickly outside, it feels like a facehugger from the movie Aliens is going to burst out at any moment. Instead, you'll find two gooey sections that look like raw chicken breasts waiting for you. Bon appétit! To be fair, the fruit does have some beneficial health properties, which is why some people hold their noses and blend it into a stinky smoothie. Others prefer to eat the fruit raw, and I can only imagine what their breath must be like. On that note, please don't expect durian-flavored chewing gum anytime soon. Although from personal experience I can tell you that durian-flavored ice cream doesn't taste that good. Number 13. Fugu. This Japanese pufferfish apparently tastes so good that people are willing to risk their lives just for a bite. You see, this pufferfish is just as venomous as it is colorful. Unfortunately, that means that if the chef prepares it incorrectly, or if it's just an extra venomous specimen, then your airway becomes paralyzed, and you die. In 2015, 5 men were poisoned at a restaurant in Japan after eating the pufferfish's venomous liver, the sale of which has been officially banned. All 5 men experienced difficulties breathing and profusely vomited the next day, and they may have even died. Apparently, they are just a handful of the 50 or so pufferfish poisoning cases that Japan receives each and every year. Number 12. Rocky Mountain oysters. There's not a lot of seafood to be found in the American Midwest, but there is an abundance of special oysters that are big enough to feed an entire family. Not only do these gigantic Rocky Mountain oysters come with no shell, they're also the only oysters that can grow on land. How is this possible? Well, it's because they're actually bull testicles that have been peeled, flattened, breaded, and fried. When a calf begins to mature into a bull, they are castrated so that they become easier to control and grow fatter. At some point, a rather brave chef figured that all of this good meat was going to waste, and the legendary recipe was born. Thank you so very much, Colorado. What would we have done without you? Number 11. Drunken shrimp. This recipe is popular throughout China, especially in large cities such as Hong Kong. Here you can purchase these gigantic live shrimp by the dozens in back alley wet markets, but you have to be sure to hurry home before they dry out and die inside of your shopping bag. After all, their deaths would ruin the meal. Oh, did I not mention that they have to be served while still alive? The dish is called drunken shrimp, because that's what they are. Literally. You have to get them drunk first by filling a bowl up with wine and throwing them in. The shrimp will drink the wine and jump around as they become wildly intoxicated, but after about 15 minutes they tire out and lie still. That's when you give them a quick dunk in boiling water, not long enough to kill them, but just long enough to cook them a little bit. Add some ginger, give them a quick swirl around the pan, and throw them into a bowl to serve to guests. Voila! Dinner is ready. To eat these shrimp, you simply bite off their heads and suck down the juices. Then you peel their shell off and eat the rest of the meat. It's the most torturous and agonizing death for sure, even for a simple crustacean. Whatever you do, just be sure to serve them in a bowl that's deep enough to accommodate them. These shrimp often like to jump high into the air in one final attempt of escaping. When this happens, just throw them back into the bowl and keep eating. Hey, the 5-second rule applies to live meals too, right? Number 10. Jellied moose nose. This rancid recipe calls for the sliced off face of a moose, nose and all. People began eating this somewhere in the early 1800s, and for some reason they continue to eat it to this day. So, do you feel like eating the snotty nose of a moose for dinner? Alright, put on your chef's hat and listen closely. You're going to want to slice into the moose's face just under its eyes and carve your way into its upper jawbone. Basically, you're removing half of its face. Boil this animal face for 45 minutes, then pluck out all of the hairs. Now you want to put the moose face into a kettle with water and boil it with onions, garlic, spices and vinegar. Leave it in this concoction overnight. That way, the nose will be nice and tender. Take the softened meat out of the broth next day and remove all of the bones and cartilage. All that should be left is white and dark meat from the animal's face. Okay, now take that delicious moose broth and pour it back over the meat and bring it to a boil. Let it cool until it is thick, gross-looking jelly. Are you ready for the last step? I don't know if I even want to tell you. Okay, well, you take your knife, cut into the congealed goop, and eat the whole thing. Jellied moose nose, just like Mama used to make. It is at this point that I would like to ask you to leave a like on this video. It really helps us reach out to people who have not seen our videos yet. Number 9. Pidon. If I told you I had an egg that was 1 century old, would you want to eat it? Probably not. Nevertheless, century egg is what the phrase pidon translates to. And if you ever wanted to know what a 100-year-old egg tastes like, here's what you have to do. First, cover an uncooked duck egg with clay and ash, and then wait a couple of months for it to ferment. When you peel back the shell, you'll find a thick black gel waiting for you to enjoy. There's no need to cook it. It's just you, your spoon, and some raw black egg goop. Of course, I would never suggest you do this in real life. Please, whatever you do, don't try to make homemade pidon because you heard of the idea from me. Ancient China used pidon as an early method to preserve food during hard times. You, on the other hand, can just use your refrigerator instead. Number 8. Balut. You might not want to order this next dish if you're at all pro-life. Otherwise, feel free to travel to the Philippines and try it out for yourself. Balut is kind of like a hard-boiled egg, except in the center is a freshly aborted treat that has been slow-cooked for you to enjoy. If this for some reason sounds good enough to make you want to make balut for yourself, here's what you need to do. First, take a fertilized duck egg that is no more than 5 days old. Leave it under the sun for about 5 hours, then put it on top of heated rice inside of a special incubator basket. The goal is to slowly roast the poor duck embryo inside of its own shell. Are you thoroughly grossed out and sad yet? Ah, good. Then now's the perfect time to show you how to eat them. Simply take a spoon and tap the top of the egg until it starts to cave in. Remove this portion of the shell with your fingers so that the egg looks like a cup. Now, tip the egg back and let its slimy contents run down the back of your throat. Tell me, what does aborted duck fluids taste like? Oh, but the balut experience doesn't end there. No, you've only eaten a small portion of the meal and the best is yet to come. Next, take your fork and pick out the hardened yellow yolk. This section is kind of like a normal egg, except it's far thicker and meatier. Please don't mind the veins. Also, sometimes there are these hard white clumps that you have to pick out of your teeth. Those are called calcium deposits. At least, I hope that's what they are. So, by this point you've guzzled down the birth fluid and eaten the meaty yolk. Are you ready for the main prize? Tucked away in the center of the egg is the shriveled grey fetus of a duck. All you have to do is unravel this alien-looking creature and dip its tiny legs in salt, and then pop it in your mouth. Organs and all. Sometimes you can taste the feathers a little bit as you chew, but that's okay. Just think about how proud your mum would be of you for trying new foods. In Filipino culture, balut is a popular menu item at bars because it supposedly pairs well with alcohol. You know, as appealing as it sounds, I think I'll have to pass on washing down my duck fetus with a pale ale. With that said, I'm sure that some fresh balut would liven up your next Super Bowl or World Cup party. Number 7. Fried tarantulas. There's an old saying that you can deep fat fry anything, and that apparently extends to the arachnid world as well. Most restaurants in Cambodia will serve fried tarantulas, usually with a slice of lime and a little pepper dipping sauce on the side. If you can mentally get past the crunch of its exoskeleton, they apparently taste somewhat like soft-shelled crabs. First, you heat some oil in a deep saucepan. This is the only normal step, things get much more disgusting from here. Next, you take your tarantula, which is either frozen or still alive, and chop off its poisonous abdomen. You only want to cook the spider's upper half. Some people like to fry the abdomen as well, but this area is what contains all of its organs, the waist and eggs. It also secretes a brown paste when cooked that is... how should I put this? A very acquired taste. Anyway, after you're done chopping the spider in half, you take a butane torch and burn away all of its coarse hairs. These body hairs are prickly on the tongue and tough to digest, so we have to remove them. After all, you want to have a good spider meal, don't you? Dip the spider in some tempura batter, coating both sides evenly, and then fry it on the oil until it becomes blackened and crispy. Once it's fully cooked, cut the spider body in half one more time and serve. This is a food that you can eat with your fingers or even put on a skewer. As Cambodians will tell you, there's nothing quite like eating fried spiders on a stick. Number 6. Bat soup. These squeaky little nightmarish creatures are probably the last thing you'd ever want to bring to your lips, so unless you're Ozzy Osbourne, the concept of eating a bat is probably highly unappealing. Truth be told, however, all around the world, from Africa to Thailand, bats are on the menu. With that said, won't you join me for a nice steaming bowl of bat soup? All we have to do is put some dead bats inside of a large kettle and add water, onion, garlic and salt, and then bring it to a boil. Now this already sounds like something straight out of a witch's cookbook. It also reportedly smells quite horrible. We then take the bats out of this broth, skin them and throw the meat back in. If you want to throw the bones and the guts back in, that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, some cultures even eat the bones whole, leave the meat raw, and eat the entire head. Of course, you want to add some shredded coconuts along with these other spices. As with any recipe, a proper seasoning is important. What you're left with is a crispy bat carcass floating in murky brown broth, with bits of scallions and carrots. And what does it taste like, you ask? Chicken. No, I'm not making that up. If you do eat bat soup, you stand to lose a lot more than just your appetite. This food can cause a special form of dementia, and experts have also traced the SARS virus, Ebola, and other diseases back to the same types of bats that are most commonly eaten. If it's any consolation, at least having dementia would cause you to forget that you ate this disgusting food to begin with. Number 5. Sheep heads. You're probably used to seeing your meat ground up or else neatly sliced into cubes and strips. In other words, rarely will you see what the animal you're eating originally looked like. This next dish, however, forces you to look straight into the eyes of said animal. Every time you glance down at your plate, you're harshly reminded that this was once a living, breathing creature. There's a certain strategy for eating sheep heads that makes cracking a lobster look like child's play. There's a sophisticated series of slices and flips with a knife and fork to get to the good meat, while avoiding the eyes, teeth, ears and other undesirable sections. By the way, The long floppy tongue is considered the best part, so don't forget to save it till last. Number 4. Kasumazu. Dairy products are probably the last thing that you would expect to find for sale on the black market, but if you take a trip to the Italian island of Sardinia, you'll find a type of cheese that is so disgusting, it's been made illegal. It's called Kasumazu, which literally translates into rotten cheese. To make this putrid Italian delicacy, you must take a hunk of regular pecorino cheese and leave it out in the sun until a certain type of cheese fly walks all over the surface and lays its eggs. As bad as this already sounds, fly eggs are surprisingly not the main ingredient. However, it's what they'll eventually hatch into that really matters. I'm talking about maggots. When you slice off the top of this cheese, underneath you'll find a squirming mass of fully developed maggots. These bugs will eat the cheese from the inside out, causing it to ferment and giving it a sour aftertaste that lingers in your mouth hours later. Oh, and while you're enjoying a nice slice of your maggot cheese, you might want to wear some protective glasses. It's not uncommon for them to jump straight into the air, and they'll get you right in the eye if you're not watching. Most people try to carefully eat around the maggots if they can help it, but some eat the whole thing without a single care. Perhaps this is why eating enough kasumazu can cause a maggot colony to form in your gut. This dangerous health hazard is why possessing this maggot cheese is illegal and can cost you up to 5,000 euros in fines. However, many people consider it a cultural staple of the island, and they pledge to continue eating it no matter what the law has to say. Rebellion comes in many forms, I suppose, and this certainly proves it. Traditionally, kasumazu is considered a very manly type of food to eat, so much so that women are culturally discouraged from partaking. In this sense, the cheese is kind of like a rite of passage, sort of like smoking a fat cigar or eating the hottest pepper you can find. Then again, if eating maggot cheese is what it takes to be a man on this island, then I'll quite happily consider myself a wimp. Number 3. Kiviak. Do you think you have what it takes to eat raw bird? How about if it's been sitting inside of another animal for months? Delicious. The ingredients for kiviak are simple, but the preparation takes forever. First, you need to kill a seal and skin it in such a way that a strip of fat is left hanging on. Then, you fold the skin with a special technique so that it resembles an inside-out book bag by the end. Next, you kill 300 small birds called auks and skin them as well, which you can do with your hands. And then you stuff them inside of the dead seal. Isn't your mouth already watering? When your skinned seal sack is completely filled to the brim with dead seabirds, you sew it shut next. Then you take some of that lovely seal fat and smear it all over the stitches. This is to keep hungry flies away, of course. The best part about kiviak is that it really is a set-it-and-forget-it type of recipe. Once you have done all of these steps, you simply leave it under a pile of rocks and let nature take its course. Months later, you go back to the burial site and uncover your meal. The smell of hundreds of fermented bird corpses is quite sickening when you pop open the stitches, but oh well, there's only one thing left to do. Reach inside, grab a huge handful of aged bird, and bring it straight to your lips. Go on, you've earned it. Long ago, the Inuit tribe would use this method during the harsh winter months to preserve their food. Animals were scarce during the winter, so kiviak was often the only source of meat available. The seal fat would keep the auk birds from spoiling, and it also made the meat quite tender. You're supposed to leave it buried for at least 3 months, though it can stay good for up to a year and a half. Well, as good as a pile of rotting carcasses can stay at least. Amazingly, this bizarre recipe is still used today, and it's especially popular at festivals or on holidays. Some people even go as far as to call it a delicacy, though only if it's prepared well. Apparently leaving the feathers on is considered a bad thing. Yeah, because feathers in my year-old raw bird meal would just be gross. Number 2. Warthog anus. There's no fancy name for this one, no Rocky Mountain oysters or anything of that nature. As the name says, this is simply the cooked anus of a warthog, so what you see is what you get. How bad can it be? Pretty bad. Not that you'd probably ever want to, but you would have to go all the way to the South African country of Namibia to experience a properly cooked warthog anus. In this harsh sub-Saharan environment, the native locals will take protein wherever they can find, and if that means looking directly up a warthog's backside, then so be it. There's surprisingly a lot of prep work involved for this meal. First, you need to kill a wild warthog, which is never an easy task. Then, you need to carefully remove its hindquarters while making sure the first foot of intestines is still attached. The next step is to tightly wrap your hands around the intestines, starting at the bottom and working your way all the way to the top. This crucial procedure is meant to squeeze all the fecal matter out before you start the actual cooking. Once you're finished removing all of the feces out by hand, take the intestine and put it over some hot coals. You'd think this is a meal that you would probably want to cook well done, but the native tribes actually prefer it to be slightly undercooked instead. Once it's charred around the edges, but still soft on the inside, you jab it with your rusty blade, pop it off the coals, sink your teeth into it, and enjoy a hearty, home-cooked warthog anus meal. When one foreigner travelled to Namibia and ate warthog anus for himself, he had only one word to describe it: chewy. Amazingly, he was able to keep it down and felt fine the next day. Within 1 week, however, he was violently ill and needed to be put on a heavy regimen of antibiotics. So, unless you grew up eating the stuff, your digestive system is probably not strong enough to handle this one. Number 1. Ikizuruki. Do you remember the drunken shrimp entry a little while ago? This next dish is about 100 times more violent, depraved, sickening, and brutal. The concept behind ikizukuri is to show how fresh the seafood is, but they really shouldn't have gone to such extreme lengths. These sadistic Japanese chefs insist on letting you know that their meat is as fresh as possible. So fresh, as a matter of fact, that the heart is still beating as your chopsticks dig inside. Sadly, these animals are not fully dead as you dine. With ikizukuri, the helpless little creatures are cut in such a way that their vital organs are kept intact. This way, they can still squirm and stay alive as you pick apart their fat and muscle, slice by slice. Salt, soy sauce, lemon and lime are all drizzled onto exposed wounds as the tortured flops helplessly on your plate, its mouth opening and closing in pain. Oh, and don't forget the burning green wasabi, which is way hotter than any horseradish. No creature should ever feel this kind of anguish, not even a simple fish. However, this brutal practice tragically extends to all manner of aquatic life: squid, octopus, which, might I add, are highly intelligent, lobsters, and even frogs are all subjected to this slow form of slaughter. The very thought of eating a live animal as it suffers on your plate is nothing short of horrifying. It's hard to imagine the kind of terror and agony that the poor animal must feel. There's nothing it can do to escape. Nowhere for it to go as it is thoughtlessly tortured and mutilated over a casual dinner conversation. Although ikizukuri is considered extremely controversial in Japan, many restaurants still continue to offer live sushi, as it's often marketed as, to this very day. Hopefully, sometime in the near future, those who eat it will come to their senses and realize how cruel of a dish it really is. Until then, many more creatures will sadly perish this way. Well, doesn't that sound delicious? Hi, my name's Ayme. You probably already knew that, but if you didn't, go check out the description where you will find a link to my YouTube channel, where I read horror stories. I hope to see you there. Now, let's finish this list off right, okay?